Okay, so last bit of this California story is to look at its land use problem, which we implied when we said the state government doesn't have a control at local levels. Local counties, cities make those decisions. And you have to look at it in the context of the climate targets. Various legislations are putting on the books. Regional greenhouse gas reduction targets. Targets refer to the reduction in per capita passenger vehicle emissions between 2005 and 2035 as adopted in 2018. So 2005 is used as a baseline and projections are made for reductions to be accomplished by 2035. The four largest regions: Southern California, San Francisco, Sacramento, Bay Area, and San Diego. So here is San Diego, and so on. So they are ranging from 4% to 17%. Okay, so you can see the color scale here. The yellowish colors are the lowest and the red colors are the largest. You can again see the difference between the counties that voted more favorably to repealing AB 32 and the goals, etc. So the land use problem, even at a global level, is always important because we talk about it in terms of deforestation, urbanization contributing to emissions, and radiative forcing. So albedo or reflectivity changes with land use change, and that changes the radiative balance. And there is lots of talk about the ability of the soil to sequester carbon if we do agriculture correctly. So California also developed a smart agriculture plan, so that is also part of the land use plan. Okay, so the mitigation issues looked at have focused more on transport. Transportation sector is specifically considered very recalcitrant, tough to manage, and it has significant part of the emissions over California. So here is vehicle miles traveled per capita and CO2 trends, and the orange line indicates vehicle miles traveled per person, and the blue line shows the emissions. So there was a drop here, and then it's been a spike. It's been a steady increase towards the end of the AB, or yes, coming towards 2020, which is the end of the Assembly Bill 32. So others here is like sustainable community strategies are aiming here with respect to 2005. They want to cut down vehicle travel and CO2 trends by 10% in 2020 and by almost 18% or so by 2035. So that's in the range that we saw here. Okay, so this is a challenge, right? If public transit and local communities building housing near public transit or building mixed neighborhoods to reduce vehicle travel and so on, then this is obviously going to be a challenge. California's success is partly an accident of geography, as we already said. The largest cities lie near the coast, where for most of the year homes achieve a pleasant temperature where neither air conditioning nor heating is required. About 40% of the state's electricity comes from low carbon sources, renewables, hydro, nuclear, and that is in part the result of deliberate policy, okay, especially since 2000, but also the product of federal subsidies for dams and the lack of large coal deposits in the state. California doesn't produce much coal. It has oil and gas. Most of the remainder of the electricity is generated from natural gas. So this combination makes it look very environmentally friendly, in addition to all the legislations it has been passing. So low emissions are also a product of service-based economy with little heavy industry. California ranks among the lowest 5 states in terms of emission intensiveness of its GDP. although this is partially offset by embedded emissions in imported products. So basically, California is, let's say, a fairly high consumption state in terms of food, meat, luxuries, whatever. But the life cycle analysis would require that all those things that are consumed also should be accounted for in terms of their emissions where they were manufactured. So whether you are importing from other parts of the US or from outside the US, all the way from China, then how do you account for those emissions? So the embedded emissions are not accounted for in these plans. Okay. Given all that, the good news continues to be that the GDP has grown, especially per capita. This is indexed to 1990 again. So the greenhouse gas emissions over the same period per capita have dropped off. That's incredibly good news, right? So you cannot help but admire that California remains a leader by example. We talked about living laboratories of San Diego, UCSD, and the community stations and so on. But here are, and of course, the cities around the world under C40 and so on that are trying to be living laboratories, and the cities in South America like Bogota, which have Medellin and Bogota, which have tried to be examples of good public transportation, bicycle routes, etc. So California as a state is a good living laboratory for the rest of the US at least, and considering the size of its economy, obviously it's also a good example for many of the countries, because it's the fifth largest economy. If the fifth largest economy can do so much, what can other countries do? So obviously there is a lot to learn. So the climate smart agriculture has also been part of this California's climate action efforts. We focused here on mitigation side of things because the whole course bending the curve is towards mitigation, not adaptation. So climate smart agriculture often heads towards adaptation, not so much reducing emissions from agriculture, but making sure the crop yields don't drop off, or that you are using as little water and energy as possible. So indirectly they are related to mitigation, but they are not directly mitigation unless there are efforts made to sequester additional carbon into the soil, which can be done, but that's not the goal here. Okay, so AB 32 we talked about started in 2006. It established greenhouse gas reduction targets from 1990 levels by 2020. There are a bunch of others that have focused on greenhouse gas reduction fund, cap and trade monies, which include sustainable agriculture practices that reduce GHG emissions and sequester carbon. So the newer bill compared to AB 32 and SB 32 actually focused also on reducing emissions. So the context in which this was all happening is that the California started to experience a multi-year drought from almost 2011 actually to 2016. As I said, 2015 was a huge El Nino, but the winter of 2015 into 2016 did not produce lots of rain and snow as expected. But 2016, which was a La Nina, the winter of 2016-17, ended up producing record amounts of snow and rain. So that has to be understood in terms of the shift of the jet, change in the subsidence. So California typically gets these Pineapple Express and so on, where the polar jet stream and the subtropical jet stream together funnel what are called atmospheric rivers. JPL does lots of predictions of atmospheric rivers and so on, which bring boatloads of moisture into California and fuel snowfall and rainfall. Okay, that ended the drought. So this was a pretty severe drought. So here Governor Brown funded sweep through GCRF funds during emergency drought declaration. So they tried to maintain the climate action even as drought was going on. Up-to-date climate change scoping plan, including agricultural groups, successfully advocated for attention to agricultural solutions to climate change. So adaptation of agriculture to climate change became part of the mitigation in terms of reducing emissions and sequestering carbon. Okay, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act here in 2014, SB 32, which expanded AB 32 as the goals were being met. So it went to 40% reduction compared to the 1990 levels by 2030. And SB 1318, short-lived climate pollutants, which we talked about in this book, like methane and carbon particles, etc. Right? HFCs, CFCs, and so on. So California legislature allocates $1 billion in this greenhouse gas reduction fund to climate change programs. $300 million go to climate smart agriculture programs. So they don't stop even when there is a severe drought. But again, the question is, can California example really help other states in the US or other countries across the world? How do you take these lessons and transfer the solutions? Not always easy, because diversity of population, wealth, socioeconomics, basic climate, basic perception of climate change, etc. make a huge difference. Nonetheless, to really end on a great positive note, California effect, it's called the California effect, really works. Okay, all these states have picked up number of projects earning credits for reducing carbon from the example of California. Oregon, Washington, generally climate friendly states, and they have a regional climate action collaboration of some sort. Two conservative states like Wyoming, South Dakota, especially Texas, and down here Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, and so on. Two, these more progressive states appear in the Northeast. Massachusetts, New York obviously tend to be quite progressive as well. So you can see that the California as a living laboratory really helps all these states to mimic them. Not necessarily peer pressure, but some sort of a motivation that comes out by looking at the example of a state that deals with climate change and continues to grow its economy. This is an argument that goes on where vested interests begin to harp on how climate action is going to cost money and hurt the economy. Especially for the new president of the US, this is going to be a big challenge. How to recover, drive the recovery of the economy in the COVID damage that has been done, and not jump straight back into high emission lifestyles, but to introduce green technology, employment, climate action, climate mitigation, and climate adaptation. So California actually provides an incredible example for all, and let's hope it continues to do so and continues to prosper, because I have lots of friends there, and some of them are actually pretty worried about climate change and want to do something. Bajwa, are you listening?